I think we can start, and I'm going to send a quick email to Natalia because I think he's apparently in St. Petersburg, but let me check with her. But I think we can kick off the sessions, and yes. Stefan.
Afternoon. It's a great pleasure to have you on the screen in front of me, and hopefully many others sort of following the debate. We had a great start this morning, and those who followed this morning discussion, they already did that. Focusing just on what kind of new world order we would like after pandemic, and not to look in how to get there, might not be the best idea. And also there were some who made a very good point that it's not only about economics, finances, but it's also about politics. It's about also geopolitics. And I think we will, in this panel, which is focused on Eurasia, on economic outlook and accelerating regional integration, we will have an opportunity to touch upon both the economic and political aspects. Now, I was responsible not only for enlargement, but also neighborhood. That's probably what put me in this today's chair. And probably with my security background, me studying in Moscow, working in Brussels, and visiting frequently China, working for CFC and CITIC, might give me a certain perspective, something what I would call a bigger picture. And I'm going to offer you that bigger picture. And I would, of course, leave up to you whether you would like to concentrate in your statements just on what you have prepared, or whether you would like somehow to react what I'm going now to say. By the way, our time is limited. We have only 1 hour in program. I was told that there is going to be a certain flexibility there, but not that much probably as we all wished. Okay, that bigger picture is the following. The Eurasia region is probably the most important one to determine what kind of format and content of multilateralism and for that also globalism we would have after the COVID-19. And it's because of one important process, integration, because this is a region where we have more than just one experience, how the integration between the regions, among the countries, was instrumental in solving the old wounds and creating the environment for a peaceful cooperation and for prosperity of all living in that area. And if I look at this region from that perspective, I see actually not one or two, but I see 3 integration projects going on. It's the European Union, it's Eurasian Economic Union, and also Belt and Road Initiative, which started as a bilateral initiative but now with a number of multinational institutions and multinational instruments, I think we could quite easily also determine that this is another integration project in this region. Now, but if you look closely, and not necessarily what's going on within those integration projects, but what's going on just between those integration projects, there are some worrying elements. The first one is whether you are in Brussels, whether you're in Moscow, or in Beijing for that, you're working on a different regulatory framework because each of that grouping has a tendency to create its own rules of the games. I mean, this is logical. This is how life happens. But if that continues without an parallel efforts to harmonize, to make the regulations compatible, we might create a dividing lines, which would be probably even more dangerous than the ideological dividing lines or iron curtains for that, which divided to Europe years ago. There is another worrying element, and this is that Eurasian Economic Union, the cooperation is getting more and more of the security cooperation also among the members. And I'm sure, sooner or later, it will be the case also for the Belt and Road initiative. So what seems to me is now that we are heading into some kind of fortress concepts rather than three integration projects working together. And what I like to come out at the end of our discussion is how to overcome that, because the opportunities are huge. From the first steps to harmonize at least some of those regulations to a legally binding international arrangement between those integration projects to the benefit of the whole Eurasian region. Now, I'll leave it here, and I would reserve my right, to intervene after each of you speaking. Now, turning to you, we have a long list of excellent speakers, and I will shortly introduce each of you before giving you the floor. The first one, I have a colleague from Jihad Azur, the director of the Middle East and Central Asia Department at the International Monetary Fund, where he oversees the fund's work in the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, and Caucasus. Mr. Azur served as a Lebanon finance minister, 2005-2008. Challenging post indeed. Before and since his time as a finance minister, he held a wide range position in the private sector. I'll give you the floor. I understand that in addition to the subject of our interest, you might have also some interesting announcements concerning the economic outlook coming directly from the IMF. Mr. Azur, Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stefan. First of all, let me also thank the organizers, University of St. Petersburg and Reinventing Bretton Woods for this very interesting gathering. Let me divide my short comments into three parts. One is, where do we stand today, as we have released our update for the 2021 outlook a few days ago, and what we have learned from the 2020 COVID-19 crisis. And I would say the most important one is going forward. What are the key issues and key challenges that the region has to deal with, and also what are the silver linings that one could build on? If we go back a year ago, the region was closing the cycle of addressing the 2015 shock, and several countries have introduced certain number of reforms, both on the financial economic side, in order to address the scars of this crisis. And then the COVID-19 crisis hit and affected most of those countries. What one can learn from this crisis is the following. It was a double shock, not only one single shock. It was a shock on lives and livelihoods of people because of the COVID-19 crisis, but also for certain countries. It came with high volatility in oil price and a double whammy shock. For others, it affected and had scars on some key sectors, like tourism, for example, in the case of Georgia, or remittances in the case of Kyrgyz. Therefore, it was a severe shock that led to big impact on the economies. The important element is countries have reacted fast and have introduced certain number of measures to protect lives and livelihoods, and also complement this with some measures in order to provide the floor to the economy. The level of fiscal and monetary measures and stimulus that were introduced were in line, and I would say even above what we saw in other parts of the world in the emerging market arena, and have helped to cushion the magnitude of the shock. In addition to that, the reforms that were introduced allow them to have a better management of the shock itself. Countries like Kazakhstan, like Georgia, have in order to address the first wave of the crisis and also recover. Reforms that were introduced in the past by establishing fiscal rules, reforming the financial sector, came into play and showed that they have strengthened their overall macroeconomic and financial stability. But also the crisis revealed certain weaknesses. One is informality is still very high, and the level of high informality affected their capacity to provide the social protection that was needed in the beginning of the crisis. Second, the reform of the financial sector that was initiated a few years ago was not fully completed, and the level of financial inclusion remained low, which means that the state has to intervene more in providing liquidity to the market. Three, we saw over the last few years some very strong positive signs in order of creating greater integration in the region, but it came under test, especially in the beginning where some countries had to resort to, I would say, certain measures to protect their economies. Therefore, 2021 was a massive shock, not seen since the end of the Soviet Union. Countries reacted to it, and therefore now they are engaging with, I would say, the recovery post-COVID and preparing for the future. Of course, the economy had to suffer, and a contraction of 2% was, in fact, affecting the whole region. The interesting part is oil exporting countries reacted faster, and therefore the impact of the crisis on their economic output was smaller in 2020 compared to the oil importing ones. Where do we stand today? Today we are at a race between the virus and the vaccine. The second wave proved to be faster and wider than the first one, and countries have, in fact, reacted differently. It means that they were able to provide certain number of measures without closing out the economy, which is a positive sign. Yet, this is an additional challenge that they need to deal with in 2021. This race between vaccine and virus also is showing that we have a large disparity between countries. But by and large, countries are preparing themselves to get and to acquire the vaccine. And the acquisition of the vaccine is very important, because if you are in the leaders, you could accelerate your growth between 0.3 to 0.5% this year because of fast and massive inoculation of the vaccine. And the opposite is really also right. You could delay your recovery because of that. The issue for the region is, while they are preparing to get the vaccine, they are still limited into one or two sources. And our work is showing that more you diversify the access to these different sources of vaccine, better you can prepare yourself for the recovery. The second element is in terms of policies. Countries who still have buffers in the region, like Georgia to a certain extent, Kazakhstan, can help and allow the economy to recover faster, because this is the second important element this year that determines the outlook. Others who don't will have a more challenging recovery, and they need to reallocate their spending within the same envelope. Three is the level of scarring is also different, and addressing those scarring will be important. In a country like Georgia, for example, impact of the crisis on the tourism sector led to one of the most severe contraction in the history of Georgia over the last 2 decades. And this is also one of the elements going forward for the region to recover. Last but not the least, what is important is still is we are in a transition year. Last year was the crisis like no other. This year is the restart. But I would say it's not only a restart, it's managing a transition where you need to still address the issue of a massive healthcare risk and dealing with the recovery. What has complicated the situation is the geopolitical development provided some silver linings, but also some tension. The tension we saw between certain countries and within countries added a new dimension to the situation in the region. And therefore, and this is my third and last point, is if we look forward, what are the priorities for this region? One, still managing and exiting the COVID crisis, still an important one. And here, social is very important. This region enjoyed in the past good level of social protection that has eroded over the past few years and led in certain cases to some social unrest. And this is a critical element in the recovery. Second is rebuild fiscal and financial buffers. Those buffers were eroded, but gradually they need to be rebuilt. And this need to be put in a medium-term strategy, a fiscal framework that allows those countries to, even if they have the flexibility in the short term, but have a direction over the medium term. And they have applied a policy framework that gave them flexibility on the monetary side, and there are a few lessons to be learned on how to refine their policy tools. This is in managing the stability of the economy and exiting the crisis. The second dimension is to mobilize safe and sustainable finance. The level of social financial inclusion is still low in the region, and we cannot recover and create the level of growth that we saw in the last 2 decades without strengthening and accelerating access to finance, especially if we want to build on the silver linings where technology, greening the recovery have showed that there is potential of accelerating the recovery. Developing and strengthening the resiliency of the banking system is a key. Last year, we did a test on the financial sector, and we saw that banks are well capitalized. And even if you stress the system, still you can have a level of resiliency in terms of capital and liquidity that is acceptable. Yet, I think where they need to expand in the future is to grow their footprint and allow for greater financial inclusion. 3 is rebuilding better. Rebuilding better is by, in fact, building on where the potential is. Digitalization, and in certain countries, agriculture, or even in other countries, increasing trade. Those are important dimensions that countries can grow. And this has to be, in fact, supported by redesigning or reformulating the role of the state and the private sector. SOEs and the reform of the SOEs is a process that has started in certain countries. It's still work in progress and need to be accelerated, because also one of the lessons activities through SOEs will weaken the overall, importantly, could crowd out the private sector going forward. The last level is the regional integration. I think the region need to move from being a corridor to become a platform. The region is definitely more and more relevant between East and West, between Europe and Asia, and I would say the postmodern globalization will redefine the way we deal with groups like Central Asia, Caucasus, Eurasia, because they are becoming more important and more relevant. But I think the challenge and the opportunity here is not to keep this region as a corridor where goods transit and only we use this as an access road or an access channel. I think now with some of the key economies of the region like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and others coming more and more together and increasing the level of intra-regional trade with the quality of infrastructure that exists and can still be improved, one can use this opportunity to create a platform in the region that can connect to Europe. And Europe is very much interested, as you know, Stefan, in growing their relationship with this part of the world. And this part of the world can benefit from the $750 billion recovery package, because this will accelerate activities. China is also redesigning its sphere of activities, but also there are other players. I see very much an increased interest between oil exporting countries to work together for the post-oil recovery between Gulf countries, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, and other countries, whereby they are all of them facing with the same challenge, trying to figure out solutions. Therefore, also we see here in the greening the recovery, a potential for many countries in the region to find an additional potential growth. Last but not the least, I think coming up as a region also will ease tensions that currently are, in fact, affecting some parts of the region, because it will allow to have, I would say, a cooperation model that is clear and transparent to the rest of the world, and allow better economic cooperation. I think what we also would like to see more regional players, not only in the financial sector, but also in the private sector. And developing regional players will allow also to strengthen the ties, and also will push in the direction of reducing some of the barriers to investment, barriers to labor, and so on. Technology will dominate, and without creating a space for it, it's impossible for the region to catch up with the rest of the world. Therefore, we're in an interesting transition. The recovery is there. It needs to be accelerated. And the positive element is it can be accelerated through some useful reforms that can benefit, I would say, the whole region and beyond. Let me stop here. And then if you have any question, I would be very happy to go into more details.
Minister, dear Jihad, it was fantastic. Thank you very much. The truth is that moving from corridor to platform very much reflects the fact that talking about those integration projects and the neighborhood they share, results in the neighborhood to be falsely pushed into cooperating with this or that integration project at the expense of cooperating with another one. So I'm going to use this phrase of yours, if I may, moving from corridors to platform. Now it's a great pleasure, Dobrý den, господин Rektor, to move to
Good day, Mr. Rector.
First of all, Rector of the St. Petersburg State University of Economics, Mr. Igor Maximtsev. You have been introduced at the beginning. You had some very interesting opening statement. So I will first of all join my predecessor to thank you very much for co-hosting this event. And second, I would just say only one sentence about you. You are well known and active in Russian Federation, but also respected in a number of countries around the world. Professor Rector, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Let me once again thank all the participants of our panel and to greet them. I'm happy that today we managed to meet in an online mode. It's a pleasure to see many friends and partners of our university and well-known and distinguished economists who do really develop the theory of economy and suggest the new solutions for the global economy problems in post-COVID era. Our university is
и сопряжение общих экономических подходов Китая и Евразийского экономического союза позволяет совершенно по-другому взглянуть экономических союзов и, конечно, без участия Европейского союза этот проект будет не настолько. Мы сегодня
Eurasian Economic Union, EU.
Реальная экономика, доходы населения, занятость населения резко сократилась.
And that program with China, One Way, One Delta, we have the same approaches in China, and pandemic, the real economy, the income of the population went down abruptly. These figures have already been provided by the colleagues today. The situation is more or less the same in all over the planet. So I believe we should review the future, and that will require some efforts on our behalf. In my introduction, I underlined that we observed social tension in many countries of the world. That's a serious signal that we should study. Well, we don't need revolutions. We want evolutions, and we would like to learn from the history lessons and not make new errors. Thus, the development of regional economic integration unions are of vital importance nowadays. Well, if globalization during the pandemic falls apart, then the regional integration unions, that's very important. As for the Eurasian Economic Union, it unites the former republics of the Soviet Union. You remember that Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Kyrgyzstan, and this union unites 182 million people, some 16 or 14% of the surface of the Earth and 14% of the planet's GDP. Well, we do a lot. We perform a lot of activities, and we understand that the chief factors today for integration within the EU and the Chinese initiative.
We should consider the following factors.
As follows. First of all, the strategic cooperation between Russia and China. It is aimed at coordination of common political and economic efforts of both countries, who are the initiators and most important drivers of integration processes. The level of trust achieved between Russia and China assists in solution
remove many of the contradictions, and all this has an impact on the
contradictions and impacts positively the development of the big Eurasia. Next is the priority development of the regions and the new formats of cooperation, which are mutually beneficial from the point of view of the national interests of the stakeholders. Let me repeat, each country has own national interests,
and when they are interconnected into a single
intertwined in common economic space, then the future development of such unions is quite possible,
including the Eurasian Economic
Union.
The next factor is the adaptation of the successful experience accumulated by other integration associations. First of all, the experience of the European Union. Our university examines deeply, scrutinizes indeed the problems, the achievements of the European integration, and the Eurasian platform, Eurasian cooperation, to a great extent repeats the stages of the development of the EU. And of course, it's important to move in a dynamic way in order to avoid mistakes. But there are always barriers, there are always contradictions that very often hamper the progress, but nonetheless do not stop it and make it possible to move. Time is limited, but still I would like to emphasize the approach that incorporates several components, not only the scrutiny of the economy of the bigger Eurasia, but also the development and the drafting of specific proposals associated with the economic development of the region and the regions which are part of the bigger Eurasia. With time constraints, I would like to speak just about the key issues. The uncertainties, external and internal, which motivate countries and companies and institutions to local chains of added value. The problem of the localization of production is also on the agenda of the Eurasian Economic Union, China, and the EU member states. In our opinion, this is one of the most important factors of the development of the regional integration in Eurasia, renovation of the dialogue within the framework of the Big Eurasia. And Big Eurasia, that's the European Union, the Eurasian Economic Union, and China. Second, the pandemic is not just a global challenge and threat, but it's also a factor of the innovation-based development in many fields in biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry. Russian scientific and research centers, as we know, have developed 3 successful vaccines, which can be produced not only in Russia, but in other countries of bigger Eurasia. And that is a possibility to build the cooperation, interregional cooperation focused on that. Allow me to remind you that the states of the European Economic Union in December last year coordinated cooperation in the field of the production, manufacturing vaccine in the countries. And well, of course, this will enable the economies and the population of these countries to achieve success quite quickly, because we understand the degree of fear that many of the people have, and this definitely is a constraint for the economic growth. For us, as the economic university, of particular importance are the priorities of joint and common development, which were emphasized at the latest meeting of the leaders of the Eurasian states in February this year in Kazakhstan. More precisely, they spoke about joint work in the post-COVID period through the development of private investments into major projects, development of the financial systems, simplification of the access to the financial markets with the European Union experience employed, and of course investments into human capital. By that we mean the education of talents and high-tech development, because so much depends on the young talent. In many of the countries pay specific attention to that. For China, for Russia, for the Eurasian Union, it's one of the priorities. Now, our university is most willing to continue its interaction and joint work with other partners in these fields, and we have accumulated quite a lot of experience in that. And we hope that we do that not only within the framework of our meeting, the way we're doing it today, but also within the framework of the new seminars. Now, there are different factors of economic factors that have an impact of everyone, and the global disintegration I mentioned does play a certain role. And in this context, such platforms for discussion, for the drafting of different proposals are very important in order to come up with the joint initiatives for our common region, for bigger Eurasia, and there are prerequisites for the development of international cooperation. And many times today we have already emphasized this, and I do hope that the post-COVID period, we will be able to do that together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Deere. You put forward a number of interesting points. Let me underline one from my perspective, extremely important. That the countries, the member states, particularly in the European Union and Eurasian Economic Union, by transferring part of its sovereignty to either Brussels institutions or Moscow institutions, should have the responsibility for exercise not only their remaining national sovereignty, but also that shared sovereignty. What I'm trying to say, if there is a problem between not just some EU member state, but the whole EU and Russia, for a number of the reasons, that should not necessarily be an obstacle to a relationship and cooperation between the European Union institutions and Eurasian Economic Union institutions. We should not be, the victim or hostage of the bilateral relationship, but we should not forget that bigger picture I was trying to refer in my introductory remarks. Thank you very much. I now have a third distinguished speaker on my list, Mr. Kalimbetov Kairat from Kazakhstan, and you are on the screen. Hello. He is governor of Astana International Financial Center and also chairman of the Agency for Strategic Planning and Reforms of Republic of Kazakhstan, former governor of National Bank, former deputy prime minister. But you also hold the position of the Minister of Economic Development and Trade. In short, if you're looking for the who is who list in Kazakhstan, you will see Mr. Kalimbetov very, very top on that list. Mr. Kalimbetov, dear Kairat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for these great opportunities to meet with my friends and colleagues. And I think, so let me start maybe from the question which was proposed by the moderator. So Stefan proposed to maybe a little bit brainstorm around what's going to be happened with global trade and integration and what we are actually thinking about this. So from one side, in the common terms, I think we have to be realistic, at least, or more close to pessimistic approach, because so all the global trends in geopolitics and the upcoming tech race between US and China, the trade disputes between US and China, pandemic restriction, say not really give us a optimistic view in the short term. I think in a mid-term or long term, we definitely understand that the vaccination is a kind of the response of humankind to this problem. I think the new US administration is more keen to talk diplomatic way with the Chinese colleagues, let's say, and we will see more and less come back to the globalization strengths. And so we all remember that we maybe recent 2-3 years, we more talk about protectionism behavior rather than globalization approach. And I think certain issues are still on place, but I think what Stefan proposes actually the better idea is just to really start to talk each other the normal trade in diplomatic way rather than talk by the language of sanctions and blacklist or whatever, let's say, non-institutional way, let's say. I think when we start to create Eurasian Economic Union, for us, the benchmark was the 30 or 40 years of the development of European Union. So this is a real way how the countries should create common markets, how the people in these countries should benefit from the regional integration. And still, I think, even beyond the, let's say, Brexit agenda, European Union is a great example how we should build the regional integration. And we strongly believe that the cooperation between European Union and Eurasian Economic Union, it's really win-win in certain terms, and we should come back as soon as possible to those agenda. So in fact, the institutional development of Eurasian Economic Union was built on examples and let's say on stages experience of European Union. And so this is one. Number two, I think that when we create Eurasian Economic Union, it was a moment when Russia, first among the members of Eurasian Economic Union, actually got access to the WTO. And I think that this is very important fact that the Eurasian Economic Union institutional agenda based on norms and standards and principles of the WTO. And I think it's a very much important, especially for the emerging markets, just to understand what is the rules of the game actually in the global trade and how we should to proceed. I know that WTO last year had a certain institutional problems that I think that we all should come back to the WTO using, let's say, by the in order to let's say realize what kind of problem we do have between each other and how we should to proceed in certain dispute resolutions dimension. Let me come back now to the particular Kazakhstani agenda, and this is kind of a small attempt to respond to Stefan's question, is that how to proceed in this very difficult realistic world. I think Kazakhstan, under the leadership of the first president Nursultan Nazarbayev, from very beginning when we've got independence in 1991, start to build the independent multi-vectoral foreign policy, which is, now I can give you some results of this policy. The structure of global trade in Kazakhstan looks the following. The 50% of the trade of Kazakhstan is European Union countries. 20% Russia and 20% China. So we all understand that. So these are kind of the right balance, which is allow us really to focus on our cooperation with our neighborhood, cooperation with our global partners, including European Union. And we have a enhanced cooperation and partnership agreement with European Union, which I think allow us really to focus on the further cooperation with the European Union. At the same time, Eurasian Economic Union is really, and actually the Rector Maximtsov mentioned about it, 5 countries which are members, are really focusing on the deeper integration between each other. And the recent summit in Almaty, which happened in Kazakhstan, actually focus on more further and deep integration, especially in the modernization of institutions agenda and the bringing new technologies agenda. I think this is also very, very important moment. So means Kazakhstan is very focusing on pragmatism in the approach in terms of the trade policy, geoeconomics policy. And in these terms, for Kazakhstan is like focusing on, in terms of regional integration, immigration within the Eurasian Economic Union. The number 2, I think, also very much important is our cooperation with our partners in Belt and Road initiatives. In fact, Belt and Road initiative been proposed by President Xi when he been visiting Kazakhstan. And for us, it's very much important also to have a stronger strategic cooperation with China. And number 3 is also Central Asia. Here is like, I think I would like to echo to Jihad Azur's points that the integration is also certain contribution and future response to the further economic development in the region. Central Asia now is a 55 million people market, which is going to be double in the next 10, 15 years because of the demographic trends. And I think this is very promising, yet unlocked market, which has to also benefits from the further joining to the globalization agenda. Recent opening up economic reforms in Uzbekistan also give us kind of optimistic view on these terms. So these are how do I see the further cooperation, and I think that as more on academic level such type of discussion would happen, I think more we can convince politicians really start to talk to each other and start to focusing on win-win agenda between different geographic zones. But in the short term, I think that we will see more regional integration rather than globalization, and I think that for for Central Eurasia, I think, which is like former Soviet Union area plus Central Asia, I think is also great opportunities to strengthening the trade and digital connectivity. It's a big room for maneuver. In terms of what is a post-COVID, or let's say, lessons which we should conclude from the COVID crisis. So I think here is a great opportunities not to come back just to the previous norma, but understanding the new norma is actually withdraw certain quick wins or certain opportunities for the further development. So one, the first is, I already mentioned, is a regional integration. Number 2, I think we should focus in on reforms agenda, modernization agenda, let's say, the upgrading the old institution or building the new institution. Here we do have a 5 institutional reforms program, and recently the President Tokayev in Kazakhstan announced the new package of the reforms in political and economic area. He created special council on Supreme Council on Reform, created special institution agency for strategic planning and reforms. And I think reforms focusing on economic and social agenda, and especially it was clear during the COVID crisis, especially during the lockdowns, that the government in broader terms should take care about the people who lost their job and provide them opportunities to create it or provide social benefits. This is very much important to avoid any kind of social tension or social unrest in the region. And number 3 is technologies or modernization of the business process, which is allow us to leapfrog, which is again online, 3D, fourth industrial revolution tools. It's a great opportunity actually to resolve the issues with access to the world-class education, world-class healthcare to the people of our countries, or let's say focusing on new technologies in terms of exporting new production to our neighborhood. So these are key issues, which is, I think, again, if we follow the strategy, let's say, if you finalize our we flatten the COVID curve or fighting the anti-crisis consequences of this pandemic agenda, and we should focus on our future economic, social, political agenda. And again, I think that it's a good opportunities here to not just for each country's thinks about the own agenda, but together on a platform like Jihad Azur mentioned. I also love this slogan, from corridor to platform. It's a great platform for the future development. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dear Kairat, many thanks. I agree with you that unless the fora like this one create a momentum, I'm sure you're pessimistic, rather gloomy forecast when it comes to the future. And I sense also in what you were saying that the pressure and the momentum needs to come not only from the members of those integration projects, but from the third countries, particularly from those who are looking not for corridors, but for platforms, just to use this phrase again. Thank you very much for that contribution. Let me now turn to Mr. Alexander Liberov. Good afternoon, Mr. Liberov, President and CEO of Siemens Russia. The whole professional career, actually almost 25 years, if I'm not mistaken, is linked to Siemens, widely recognized technological and machinery giant working in a number of countries across many continents. So welcome among us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and hello to everyone. Actually, that's true. The 25 years within one company, but these years were not boring. I have privilege to work on 4 different continents and different businesses, and as some of you might know, the Siemens is pretty complex company with absolutely different businesses, from healthcare back to rail, energy, and building automation, industrial sectors. So, I mean, talking about business in the region, Siemens has very long-lasting roots in Russia. As some of you might know, Siemens history started in St. Petersburg around about 170 years ago, and actually had, despite of some crises like 2 world wars in the 20th century, had uninterrupted history in Russia. So we always say that we are not just a pure German company here, but we already are very much integrated a Russian-German company. We have around about 7,000 employees in Russia. We have localized quite a lot. We have several productions in St. Petersburg, in Voronezh, in Yekaterinburg, and many brand names like Lastishka trains having been produced already in Russia with pretty high level of local value add and localization. If I talk about Central Asia, actually I'm responsible not just for Russia, but also for Belarus and Central Asia. And we see this region is very much connected, of course, to Russia due to historical reasons, language, and also value chain connections. And we have been also for quite some time in Central Asia, like we opened our offices in 1994 in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And we continue to believe on those markets. We have around about 150 employees, of course, considerably less than in Russia, working in Central Asia. But nevertheless, we see quite a lot of potential in those countries. Also considering pretty significant growth perspectives there, even though after COVID-19, as we are assuming the growth opportunities of 2 to 4 percentage points percent per year of GDP. And as some of you already touched COVID-19 situation, that it's not just a big challenge and crisis, but also creates some opportunities. From the business point of view, I can only support those statements. We certainly see a lot of opportunities, and we have already very specific actions taken. For example, in Moscow, we are consolidating 3 offices into 1 building. We are significantly increasing the desk share ratio for our employees, and we will still provide opportunity for our employees to work 2 to 3 days a week, even after lifting the whole restrictions, to work from home. So that was pretty well a proven point, and it worked very well during the COVID-19 situation. Our financial numbers for 2020 was even above the budget. So that proved that this level of trust and competence as what we pay to our employees is being paid back. And that, of course, opportunities for employees, because as you can imagine, in such large cities, St. Petersburg, you stuck in traffic and lose quite a lot of time, waste quite a lot of time. On one hand, on the other hand, as it would, of course, Kyiv also to significantly use expensive office space, and addition to that, I would say the significant reduction of traveling is being planned, although for even time after COVID-19, where we would, of course, still travel and to visit our customers, but many meetings, as we have today, certainly can be done online in an efficient way. Talking about market potential in Central Asia, as I said, we do believe into this market, and we present at the moment in Central Asia, not just in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, but also in Turkmenistan, with the entire business portfolio. We have ongoing projects in the digitalization and automation of industry, infrastructure, in power generation, healthcare, and of course, railway business. So from my perspective, the fast economic development of those countries provides opportunities and creates challenges on its own. It's certainly a necessity to increase consumption in energy. It's a need to upgrade transportation system and infrastructure, the logistics, especially in large populated areas. It's a need for reorientation and technological upgrades in industry. It's a need to develop local competences, because it's not just about technologies, but of course we need people in the region who would be able to pick up those technologies, the transfer of know-how into the region, and of course starting from local education, global exchange and training programs with German universities. This is something that we certainly keep in mind in order to increase local competence and to proceed with the development. And of course, Central Asia, from my perspective, has certainly interesting position, having been between Russia and China, and I think it's both. It's an advantage and it's also a challenge. There's potential for technological and financial support, but strong dependence on development of external markets. Talking about Siemens' focus in Central Asia, we work closely with the governments of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. In those countries, the same way as probably in Russia, the political elite is playing quite a significant role also in economy, in business life, especially in infrastructure, energy projects. And I personally had a privilege to meet in the last 2 years the president of Kazakhstan, Mr. Tokayev. But we also are pretty much on a monthly basis in touch with the first Vice Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, Mr. Sklar, who is also head of working group for Germany. But also with Uzbekistan, whenever I get a chance, I visit Uzbekistan, and we have the pretty high-level meetings, including, I met already a few times, the Prime Minister of Uzbekistan. So we have already the first projects in both countries in energy arena. And last year, before the crisis, in frame of Munich Security Conference, we signed a memorandum of understanding with Kazakh government to develop industry infrastructure. And the goal of the Kazakh government is certainly to use digitalization as a drive for economy, as a drive for increase of productivity in the industry. But at the same time, what the president told us, it's a motivation to bring more transparency into economy. I mean, to see about value chain, and of course with the modern technologies like blockchain. I mean, you can install it in a very professional and efficient manner. The projects that we are working at the moment in Kazakhstan, at least addressing this is certainly smart grids and digitalization. We see digitalization as a certain driver for the economy, and here in the first run, we are talking about digital twins, like digital twin technology allows to create a digital copy of electrical grids and even its components. And of course, you can simulate this with different adding capacity or increasing or decreasing capacity on energy consumption. You can see any problems, potential problems with the grid, and of course you can react on it in a more faster way, as with let's say having the digital twin of such grid, so it saves us quite a lot of time, efforts, and also resources. We see also potential in automation and digitalization of industry. These are the first projects we are trying to address as a pilot projects. We are in contact with the government, and certain ideas have been already identified. And from my perspective, digitalization and automation is a driver, or is the driver for those countries. The same, by the way, as for Russia, to drive, let's say, the innovation of those countries further. It's also not just about productivity and transparency. It's also about sustainability of the business, about environmental protection, because if we are more efficient in, let's say, production value chain, in our, let's say, energy consumption, we, of course, also increase ecological situation in such countries, which is certainly very much on the agenda, on the political agenda of all the governments in the region. I think what is important as a key for success to realize those projects and to come, let's say, further with the digitalization is to have a seamless communication and joint project set up that includes all. So I underline as all the stakeholders in government and respective industries, like policymakers, financing institutions, end customers, local partners and suppliers, and from our side, of course, consultants, engineers, and top management. This is not just pure the product business where you can deliver the product and install it, and that's it. It's much more complexity inside, including, of course, legislation, financing, project realization, design, and therefore it is important to realize a very seamless and close communication, coordination between all stakeholders in order really to get feasible improvement. The challenges are usually not just to identify the right technical solution. That we have already certain pilot projects realized in other countries to solve one particular problem, and rather to have a holistic view in the long-term development of national economy, of the specific company, to create, so to speak, a roadmap as a way you can see a long-term or mid-term development as a way you would like to be in 5, 7, 10 years from now, and really to have a consequent development into that direction rather than just, as I said, to solve one small particular problem. I mean, for us, the goal is a long-term partnership which creates local know-how and technical expertise inside Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And as I already said, we do believe into those markets the same way as we do believe into Russian market, despite all political tension at the moment, which is of course not easy because it's certainly not tailwind, but rather headwind. But nevertheless, as I always say, as Siemens was able to survive 2 world wars as a German company, and I do believe that still, despite all political tension at the moment between European Union and Russia, the businesses will remain here. Though it's an interesting market. It also creates our working places in Europe, and there is a lot of strategic complementarity between both regions. And Russia certainly needs Europe, and Europe needs Russia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Alexander, many thanks. Thank you very much. It was interesting perspective. I'm sure you have started already to feel another challenge and the pressure of another challenge. And it is to what extent, particularly for the EU member states and its citizens, the trade is linked with other fields and areas and issues like the climate change and environment protection, like the protection of fundamental rights and so on. So it's going to be another challenge for you, but the job you're doing is extremely important, and I hope we have more of the companies like Siemens through its work in the EU and the Eurasian Economic Union and around sort of making the need to cooperate among or between the integration project even more topical. Thank you very much. There was another challenge you mentioned at the end, and I'm going now to ask our two colleagues from the East, if I may say so, to ask the following questions. Technology has been always seen as the area where there is a huge opportunity for cooperation, whether it's a digital economy and so on and so on. But with or without Trump, and I'm sort of referring to the morning discussion, I think the technology becomes now more the area of competitions rather than cooperation. How and to what extent this new phenomena would have an impact on the relationship and cooperation between China on one side, and for that, the East, Asia on one side, and particularly the European Union on the other side. Now, the first one to talk is Madame Mengele. Sorry for my pronunciation. She's currently the Director of Global Affairs at Thousand Cities Strategies Algorithm Cloud Technology and Innovative Data Technology Consultancy for central banks and policymakers around the world. Madame Li was a former Chinese Foreign Ministry lecturer specialized in training the diplomats and officials. She played an essential role in multiple international projects among China, Russia, Belarus, and various Central Asian countries, and I already paid a compliment to her beautiful Russian language. Madame Li, the floor is yours.
Добрый день, дамы и господа. Я
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a director for global affairs, TCSA company, and the topic of my presentation is the system of macroeconomic governance on the basis of data, a precise improvement of governance efficiency. Under the impact of COVID-19, many of the economic science of the nation are recessed, and the system of macroeconomic governance also goes through a serious and difficult period. TSSA company, the cloud technologies company, assists different countries in their technological development through the modeling of different macroeconomic systems on the basis of data. We're using open thinking approach and the open source data technologies. And starting with 2014, we have been looking for ways to expand macroeconomic systems of and the positions of the governments through the well-coordinated, structurized databases. We offer solutions in order to improve the governance efficiency. We can see there are different regional partnerships in the world providing the free movement of goods, services, and in order to carry out well-coordinated policy in different economic fields. But even within the framework of a single country, we need to implement the policy, even if it is well coordinated, not to mention the actual implementation of the policy between the countries in the region. And there is a lot of reasons that make it difficult: economic regimens, legislation, different levels of development, different structural problems. And one of the reasons is the inability of the countries to provide for the digitization when developing and implementing the policy, and inability to work with the sources of precise data. And the traditional analysis of macroeconomic data is limited from the point of view of its precision. And here I would like to present our innovative approach, which, along with the data technologies and our well-coordinated algorithmic structure, provides with the opportunity to resolve different problems. Our innovative approach is based on the balance between the demand and supply. We know that one of the major functions of the price is the balance between demand and supply. And in the process of the economic development, in our understanding, the mechanism of pricing goes from the basic price, which is dependent on the nominal price, to the effective price, and then the price bubble is formed. The economic activity that is based on this bubble is fraught with unpredictable risks, and we really need to think how to diminish the risks, particularly in the limited regions. And our solution is in the following: we look for ways to coordinate price and system, and we collect data on transactions and our technology through the expansion of the system of the information unit carries out a synchronization and supports in every transaction and associates us with the price. And what do we have as a result of this precise correlation? The content on transaction and the price of the transaction. How important is that for economic development? We know for each and every responsible government that is focused on the development of the national economy, it's important to have a stable social basis, and at the same time it's important to have a lively market. The system of data can provide the effective layer by layer governance of pricing, and it provides for the independent digital support of social resources, infrastructures, medical services, education, and so on, which are so important for the stable basis of the society. At the same time, opening access to different sectors of the economy, stimulating them for further development. This makes it possible to modernize our obscure model and improve it, and thus reach the level of precise governance. Then, how do we collect? How do we carry out the calculation? How do we analyze the enormous amount of data within the framework of a whole state? And how can we use all the data for the governance efficiency improvement? First of all, I would like to speak of how we do it. Our architecture collects data for each money transaction with a simultaneous content and spreads it over the subsystems. When processing the data is qualified by 6 spheres, which cover the whole area of public governance. And these 6 platforms, which you can find over here, algorithmic platforms and transmission systems for sectoral markets, infrastructure, social security, and so on and so forth. And for the application of data, our basic structure of data, which incorporates all the data from the 6 platforms, has a universal character and can function in each and every measurement at the level of different entities of the system. And this is a universal basic structure which can act at the micro level, at the macro. We can start working at the level of human beings and up to the macro level at the level of a state. And this universal data structure makes it possible to achieve the most profitable and effective ways of the data infiltration analysis. And thus, our basic algorithmic structure transforms different data into a uniform data, which makes it possible to carry out precise calculations, analysis, and application. And now, this is our innovative economic approach, which together with the data technologies helps to implement the work on the governance efficiency. How can we apply it in reality? Now, if we take the platform of algorithmic calculations in the sphere of infrastructure, the work carried out in China, we know the governments of different cities, of different countries invest into infrastructure for the economic development. But the building of the infrastructure is very expensive, and it's difficult to sustain that within a short period of time. And this is a heavy burden on the budget. And using the example of the Guju province, on the basis of a universal structure, we carried out the redefinition of the price and cost of the existing infrastructure in compliance with its economic efficiency, and not just the construction expenses. And the use of our algorithmic platform for the infrastructure in combination with the financial instruments altogether enabled the local governments of dozens and dozens of cities in China to earn billions of yuan into the budget. So we follow from the economic efficiency, and so the price and cost are correlating, and thus the government can use an instrument for the paying of the debts and for the building of a mechanism dealing with the cyclic problems. And here you can see just one example in the sphere of infrastructure. But our data platforms that function on the algorithmic basis that we have devised can be applied in different spheres of public governance, including public and private sectors, enabling the precision of macroeconomic governance on the basis of data. And with that, I will finish my presentation and hope that next time there will be an opportunity to speak in more detail about our data technologies and the sphere of our application for the benefit of governments and states. Thank you.
I appreciate your contribution a lot. May I, at this point of the time, sort of make the rearrangement of the speakers and ask Natalia Volkova, Madam Volkova, to take the floor. I know that you have also Volchkova, actually, if I look at that. I know that you have a presentation also to offer, and I will ask Professor Venhai then to finish with our panel. Do we have, Madam Volchkova, do we have Natalia online? Perfect. I see the screen sharing starting. Yeah. Excellent. She's a vice director of the Russian Foreign Trade Academy, director of the Center of Economic and Financial Research, and a senior lecturer at the New Economic School in Moscow. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for very interesting presentation. It is very insightful, and it is very much related to the issues we discussed in Moscow with Eurasian Economic Commission, with the Ministry of Economic Development, given this new approach, recent new approach to developing a strategy of social economic development in Russia. And definitely Eurasian integration is an important part of all this discussion. So I will give just a few ideas that we are discussing and estimating as a potential development of this Eurasian integration. And the issues that we are dealing with is the very peculiar feature of Eurasian economic integration, which is different from what we see in many other economic integrated, regional integrated integration unions and agreements, namely the very strong heterogeneity of members and very strong linkages of members of Eurasian Economic Union with the third countries. And this is important features which will define and which is defining and will define the development of Eurasian Economic Union. So while for this region, for some countries of the Union, the common market is important, but it's not for all of countries. Like for bigger members like Russia and Kazakhstan, the importance of the internal market is quite limited. And it is while we do observe over recent years the faster development of internal trade relative to external trade, nevertheless, both the trade structure and investment structure of the member countries demonstrate a very strong dependence of trade and investment with the third countries, not members of Eurasian Economic Union. There is a heterogeneity, like substantial heterogeneity for Armenia, Belarus, to less extent Kyrgyzstan. The importance of member markets, internal markets, both in terms of investment and trade, is substantial, but for Russia and Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, it is much limited. So the successful integration within the Eurasian Economic Union cannot be developed, cannot be accelerated without alignment of internal integration with external one, because of these effects of size and importance. So we believe that this the coordination of the foreign economic policy with relation to third countries is an important ingredient of future success of the Eurasian Economic Union. Along with the expanding the capabilities or competences of Eurasian Economic Commission and development of internal barrierless, barrier-free environment for the movement of goods, services, and capital. So this is three pillars of the successful development of Eurasian Economic Union in post-COVID world will depend on how successful will be development in these three areas. And I will just give you a few hints what particular coordinated foreign economic policy in the area with respect to third countries might be. What we keep in mind and what we are studying over recent months and years is the potential development of big Eurasian partnership, which is very important given the recent development in the region, the signing of the comprehensive partnership in this region, which Russia and Eurasian Economic Union so far left outside, but the success of the integration in the region will depend how well Russia might utilize these new opportunities along this way. So we consider the model of this big Eurasian partnership in a way which goes both in a way to develop non-preferential trade agreement, a sort of Eurasian Economic Union and regional comprehensive partnership, And on the other hand, this preferential trade agreement. So this development on these two areas, which might be going with different partners and different set of partners. It is the important way to align interests of internal integration within the Eurasian Economic Union and external one. And in that regard, we did some estimations of the effects, of the potential effects of this union, which provides us with some numbers such the potential effect of this big Eurasian partnership might generate up to $60 to $70 billion of trade flows for the member countries, which is the important which is very important for development in post-COVID economy. So that is the proposal that we are working on, and we believe that this is an important way to ensure the success of the Eurasian Economic Union. Thank you.
No, that was very interesting insight. Thank you very much for that. I know that the ambitions were very high sometimes ago to have already at this point of the time a political union, but I see that the ambition has not been abandoned. It might be probably more realistically tackled. What's going to be interesting from my perspective is how you succeed, to what extent to coordinate your foreign policy vis-à-vis the third countries and vis-à-vis the Belt and Road Initiative, the European Union and others. Okay, thank you very much. And we have, the last but not least, we have Kim Hai, Director of Eurasian Scientific Institute of Development at University and Heilongjiang, the Center on Analytics on the key issues of the Chinese Provincial Party Committee of the province of Heilongjiang. You're also researchers, and you also played a crucial role in strategic collaboration between China and Russia in your province. Mr. Hai, you have the floor, please.
Дорогие друзья, дорогие коллеги,
dear friends and dear colleagues, I'm happy to be here at the conference. I would like to thank for the invitation to be here, to be at the conference. My topic is on the initiative One Belt, One Route. Russia and China deepen innovations in the mechanisms of trade and economic cooperation. The present-day global forms of trade and economic relations change deeply, and they are structurally being transformed. Interdependence and cooperation between the countries becomes more and more deep. And
роли в международном экономическом отношении. Я считаю, что
mechanicism more and more important role in the international economic relations. I believe that mechanisms for innovations include the following three things, especially at the post-COVID era. First of all, innovations in the mechanisms of trade cooperation. We should keep improving initiatives in this field and cooperation with economic Union of Russia. Also, the Russian-Chinese relations are constantly developing. The mechanisms of trade and economic cooperation keep being improved. I believe that the modern condition of trade and economic cooperation between the countries based on the initiative One Belt, One Way support the necessary support for cooperation. We are uniting our countries better, and we are using beneficially the differences of our country. Well, we are studying the most important issues, and our institutions, scientific institutions in the field of economy, are advising the leaders of our country on how to improve our future cooperation. I can forecast that the present-day condition of these tools shall get improved in future. We have done the assessment of the serviceability of this tool, and we are ready to have multilateral forms of cooperation, such as the BRICS countries and the SCO Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Such mechanisms are really necessary for the development of the trade and economic relations between our countries. This is necessary for sustainable, healthy development of trade and economic relations in a long-term period. For that to take place between China and Russia, we should have good tools that will enable us to keep improving our trade and economic cooperation. Yes, we should improve mutual trade. It should grow and be sustainable. Innovations of these tools, and we need innovations in the field of energy. Within the initiative One Way, One Belt, Russian-Chinese cooperation is quickly developing in the field of production as well. It's now an important component of the trade and economic relations of our two countries. It's also the chief direction of development in future. Well, really, we have beneficiary conditions for cooperation. We have good relations between our countries, and the two countries can benefit from mutual cooperation. And this initiative, One Belt, One Way, provides great opportunities for us. Well, Russia-China cooperation has a long history, but now it's even more intensified. It's mainly in the field of energy, transport, aerospace, industry, production of civil cars, agriculture, and in the field of pharmaceuticals. Well, cooperation between our countries is now in good conditions. Yeah. Both our countries shall benefit from cooperation, and we have great prospects for the future. Technologies are necessary to speed up the future development of our countries. So the cooperation in the field of production is encountering a lot of different challenges. For example, the adequate support from our politicians, a good comprehensive environment in Russia, and good tools for cooperation. In future, China and Russia should create a more perfect system for the support of cooperation in the field of production. Well, this is necessary to make the productions of our countries more efficient. And innovations, if they are united, produce the effect of synergy. Thus, we will be able to develop economy and to transform the modern production, to upgrade it. And this will support the sustainable and healthy economic development. The General Secretary of Chinese Communist Party, Mr. Sitebin, at the 12th meeting of the Communist Party of China, has said that innovations are the driver of the future development of the economy. And innovations are a strategic support for the creation of a future economy. Hence, we should support the development of innovations. The President of Russia, Mr. Putin, has many times underlined the importance of innovations in different fields. He suggests to develop innovative economy to promote the upgrading and modernization. Yeah, both our countries should look for innovations. That's the way of the development. Russia has a good scientific base and many technical achievements, but sometimes they are not very good in promotion of these innovations in the industry. In China, we have sufficient of money of financing for we can finance both the scientific research and the implementation of the innovations in practice. Thus, if the forces of the two countries are united, we can achieve the effect of synergy, and both science and technology may get the future development in both our countries. Thus, the cooperation between our two countries shall be continuous and mutually beneficial. That's my opinion. Thanks a lot for your attention.
That's good. I was just complaining how unbelievably
Да-да-да. Я как раз жаловался, какую трудную работу мне Марк дал. Он мне дал меньше времени и больше спикеров, а я ему обещал закончить все вовремя. Но все-таки хотел бы сделать несколько замечаний по поводу...
Прошу прощения, поменяйте, пожалуйста.
Номер первый.
Number one, I think the sooner we get up from the current pandemic situation, the better. It's very good to talk to each other wearing sometimes tie and not necessarily wearing the pants, but that's not the way how to tackle many and even more difficult challenges than before the pandemic. So someone dreaming that we will continue the business like today, it's a nonsense. It will be indeed a very gloomy future if we are not able to get out from the current digital constraints. And I see them as a constraint, not only as a benefit. Point number two, I think we have been trying to make the case of moving from the current stalemate to a cooperation of integrations. And I hope very much that we will build the basis for sometimes in the future for integration of integrations. And third remark, Mark, this is for you and for the committee you're chairing, reinventing Bretton Woods, reinventing the institutions. I think it's obvious that they cannot be built just on the national interest or even the integration project interests because they are sort of short term. It's important for them to be sustainable, and for that reasons there needs to increase the value. There needs to also be built on the values and fundamental freedoms. We need to reinvent what's uniting us as persons, as a free human being. Mark, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thanks all the panelists. You have done a great job. Thank you very much.
Stefan, thank you very much. Thank you for all of you for joining this afternoon's sessions. I know we have a lot of speakers, but very good input and content coming from all different countries, Washington, Russia, China, Kazakhstan. So thanks for all of you. We are going to go straight now to the next session about the future of international finance and trade that will be chaired by Karsten Moon. Thanks, and we go straight to the next session. Thank you. Thanks, Stefan.